Welcome to The Explainer. I am so glad you're here today because we are about to tackle a totally essential topic. Think of this explainer as your ultimate high-yield exam cheat sheet for entrepreneurship dynamics. Whether you're prepping for a massive test or you just really need a crystal clear understanding of what actually makes entrepreneurs tick, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down the environment, the psychology, and the exact skills of successful founders, and we'll cover all the crucial details you cannot afford to miss. So let's dive right into this.
Here is our game plan for today. Let's build a mental filing cabinet of exactly what we'll conquer. First, the entrepreneurial environment. Second, their role in the economy. Third, the mechanics of motivation. Fourth, the traits of true achievers. And finally, the 12 essential competencies. Let's get right to it.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the entrepreneurial environment, focusing on external factors.
Think of a startup environment like a giant puzzle with three main pieces. First, the economic conditions. These are the most direct, right? You physically need a market with demand, capital to buy machines and hire people, specialized labor, and raw materials. Without those, a business literally cannot start. But then you have the psychological and governmental pieces. Sometimes, a societal loss of status pushes people to prove themselves, or a culture just naturally breeds a high need for achievement. Combine that internal psychological push with government policies, facilities, and incentives, and bam, you have the perfect runway for a new business to take off.
Moving right along to Section 2, role in the economy, looking specifically at impact and growth.
So the crucial takeaway here is a major contrast you definitely need to remember. The role an entrepreneur plays depends so heavily on where they actually are. In developed countries like the US or Japan, abundant resources and a strong industrial baseline allow entrepreneurs to be true innovators. They're the ones driving the entire economy forward. But in underdeveloped regions facing a serious lack of capital, weak infrastructure, and missing skills, entrepreneurs have to operate differently. Out of sheer necessity, they are often imitators rather than innovators, running small-scale businesses. It is the exact same entrepreneurial spirit, just adapting to a totally different set of survival conditions.
Exam alert. Let's rapidly summarize what entrepreneurs actually do for a society's bottom line. It's basically a chain reaction. They take idle savings and drive capital formation, which creates jobs and directly slashes unemployment. This naturally leads to balanced regional development and a much more equal distribution of wealth. By ensuring the proper use of resources, they even end up promoting major export trade. Seriously, if you get an essay question on economic impact, these are your golden, high-yield summary points.
Okay, we've nailed the outside world. Now let's flip it inwards with Section 3, the mechanics of motivation, or the inner drive.
I want you to literally take a mental screenshot of this definition from Dalton E. McFarland. Motivation explains how urges, desires, and needs control human behavior. It's the absolute perfect foundational quote for your test. You know, motivation isn't just some corporate buzzword. It is the actual mechanical process that forces relentless, everyday work toward a goal.
And that process flows in a super simple three-step chain: motive, behavior, goal. The motive is that inner spark. That spark activates your behavior, which is the actual physical directed work. And that behavior is aimed directly at securing your goal. Motive to behavior to goal. It really is that simple.
To figure out what those motives actually are, we have to look at Maslow's need hierarchy. Let's walk from the bottom all the way to the top. Founders start with physiological needs. They work to earn money just for basic food and shelter. Once they're secure, they seek safety needs, like long-term job security and protection. Then comes social needs, like interacting with employees and building a community. Higher up is esteem, where they crave confidence, a solid reputation, and true independence. And finally, at the very peak, is self-actualization. That's the ultimate drive to become the absolute best version of themselves through the massive success of their business.
But listen, Maslow is not the only theorist you need to know for this. We also have McClelland's acquired needs theory, which argues that people develop needs based on their life experiences. Pairing his academic terms with some simple catchphrases will make this stick in your short-term memory instantly. First up, NACH, the need for achievement. This is the deep desire for excellence, and the catchphrase is, I must succeed. This is literally the most crucial motive for starting a business. Next is N-Power, the need for power. This is the desire for control. The catchphrase is, I want to lead. And finally, NAF, the need for affiliation. That's the desire for connection, and its catchphrase is, I want good relationships, which is super important for networking. Now, everyone has a mix of all three, but one is always dominant.
Now that we know their underlying motives, especially that high need for achievement, let's roll right into Section 4,
Traits of True Achievers, which is all about the behavior of success.
So what does this motivation look like when it's walking around in the real world? Well, there are 6 core traits of achievement-oriented entrepreneurs. First, a relentless drive to achieve high standards. Second, calculated risk-taking. They don't just gamble blindly, they take moderate, carefully analyzed risks. Third, and please draw a massive star next to this one in your notes, is an internal locus of control. This is the unshakable belief that success depends entirely on their own effort, not luck, not fate. Fourth, a tolerance for failure, where mistakes are basically just data for learning. Fifth, actively seeking feedback so they can quickly improve. And sixth, integrity and reliability to build rock-solid trust with partners and customers.
And it's not just about getting rich or fulfilling social needs. There's an added layer here called competence motivation. True entrepreneurs have this deep-seated desire to do exceptionally high-quality work. They seek absolute mastery of their craft, they're constantly trying to be innovative, and they perform well simply because doing a truly great job gives them immense internal satisfaction. Earning the respect of their peers is just the cherry on top.
All right, we made it to the final stretch. Section 5, 12 essential competencies, otherwise known as the PECs.
There are exactly 12 personal entrepreneurial competencies mapped out by McClelland and McBaer back in 1985. Consider this your definitive, end-all be-all checklist for entrepreneurial success. If you want to know what a founder actually does on a random Tuesday afternoon just to keep their business breathing, this is it. Let's break them down.
Let's tackle the first half, which we can think of as the action phase. It starts with initiative. That means taking action early without waiting to be told. By taking the initiative, they naturally see and act on opportunities, grabbing those unusual chances for finance or expansion before anyone else does. When obstacles inevitably pop up, persistence kicks in. They simply refuse to quit. To overcome those hurdles, they lean heavily into information seeking, consulting the experts to find a way forward. Through all of that chaos, they maintain a deep concern for high quality of work, and they top it off with a commitment to the work contract, making deep personal sacrifices just to make sure the customer is totally satisfied.
Now for the final 6, which are all about management and people skills. To run things smoothly, they develop an efficiency orientation, constantly trying to find faster, cheaper methods. That, of course, requires systematic planning, which means breaking massive, scary tasks into logical steps. When those steps fail, they rely on problem solving to invent completely new strategies. Leading a team through all of this requires massive self-confidence in their own abilities. This confidence allows for assertiveness, meaning they face issues openly and deal with poor performance head-on. And finally, persuasion. That is the absolutely crucial ability to influence others, convince investors, and keep the whole team motivated to keep pushing.
Wow. Okay, we covered the external environment, the economic impact, the internal motivation, the key traits, and all 12 competencies. You completely have the full picture now. So I want to leave you with this one question to think about. If ACNEDGE, that deep need for achievement, drives business success, and the 12 PECs are the tools to actually get there, which dominant need is controlling your study behavior today? Are you tapping into your own internal locus of control right now? I really hope this explainer leaves you feeling fully equipped, incredibly confident, and totally ready to crush your exam. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and keep persisting. You've got this.